I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this, but here I am. My name's Jake and my wife's name is Emily. We've been married for 3 years and honestly I thought things were pretty good or at least stable. We had our ups and downs like everyone, but nothing that seemed insurmountable. We had plans, a future, and I genuinely believed she was the one. Then, out of nowhere, everything started falling apart. It all began subtly. Small signs, really. Emily started acting distant, distracted even. She'd cancel plans last minute or be on her phone more than usual. Whenever I'd ask if something was wrong, she'd brush it off with that bitchy smile of hers, saying I was just paranoid or that she was busy with work. I bought it at first. She's always been a bit of a bitch when she's annoyed, but I thought maybe she was just stressed. I tried to give her space, but something about her changed. She was more defensive, more secretive about her phone. I'd catch her hiding it when I walked into the room, or she'd suddenly get super annoyed if I tried to look over her shoulder. The biggest red flag, though, was the way she kept glancing at her phone, especially around our family. Our parents' anniversary party was coming up, and she was unusually tense about it. Usually, she'd be excited, helping me with the plans, talking about how great it would be. But that week, she was cold and snippy. She snapped at me over petty things, and I remember catching her texting after she thought I wasn't looking. I didn't think much of it at first, just chalked it up to her being stressed or maybe a little overworked. Then I started noticing other things. Her phone bill suddenly shot up, and I found some weird late-night texts that didn't make sense. They weren't explicit at first, just flirty, suggestive messages that seemed like they were from someone she knew. I didn't recognize the number, and when I tried to ask her about it, she acted like I was crazy. She told me I was imagining things, that I was paranoid, and that I needed to relax. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't shake that feeling in my gut that something was seriously wrong. The night of the anniversary party, I had a gut feeling I couldn't ignore. I stayed late at work pretending to be busy, but really I was lurking around her phone trying to find something concrete. That's when I saw it. Hidden in her messages, there was a conversation that just made my stomach turn. It was her talking to her brother, Mark. They'd been exchanging texts for weeks, flirty shit, talking about how they couldn't keep their hands off each other, how much they missed being close. The thing that hit me hardest was the way they talked about their sex, how she loved the way he touched her, how they secretly wanted to be together. My heart sank. I never suspected Mark would do that to me. I never thought Emily would cheat with her own brother. That's when it all clicked. The secret glances, the late nights, the cold shoulders, they were all part of something much darker. I felt like the ground was crumbling beneath me. I'd never been so betrayed in my life. I stared at the phone in my hand, trying to process what I'd just seen. I thought about confronting her right then, but I was too stunned. I needed time to think, too. Figure out what this meant for us. After I saw those texts, I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept racing. Everything suddenly felt broken beyond repair. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I didn't see what was right in front of me. Emily, my wife, the woman I trusted with everything, was cheating on me with her own brother. It was so surreal, so disgusting that I couldn't even bring myself to cry. I just sat there, staring at the ceiling, feeling numb. The next day, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. I had to confront her. I waited until she came home from work, trying to act normal, but inside I was boiling. When she stepped through the door, I could see her smirk, that little bitchy smile she always had when she thought she was getting away with something. I asked her straight up about the texts. She looked surprised at first, then her face twisted into that smug, bitchy expression she loves. She told me I was jealous, that I was imagining things, that I was just insecure. She lied right to my face, claiming I was paranoid and that her brother was just a good friend, but I wasn't buying it. I pulled out her phone and showed her the screenshots I'd taken. Her face went pale for a second, then she started yelling, saying I was invading her privacy, that I had no right to look through her stuff. She called me controlling, accused me of spying on her because I didn't trust her. That's when the real anger kicked in. I told her I wasn't going to be played for a fool, especially not by her and her brother of all people. I told her I'd seen enough to know she was cheating and that I wanted to hear her admit it. She kept denying it, of course. "You're crazy," she yelled. "You're making shit up." She spun this whole story about how her brother was just helping her with family stuff, how I was overreacting because I was insecure. She even threw in that I was imagining the chemistry, the flirtation, and that I was jealous because she was better looking than me. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I'd been married to her for 3 years, and here she was spinning lies like she was the victim. Deep down, I was hurt. I was furious. And honestly, I was starting to feel sick. I couldn't believe the woman I loved, my wife, was capable of this kind of betrayal. It's one thing to cheat with a stranger, but with your brother. That's twisted on a level I couldn't even process at that moment. I felt betrayed not just as her husband, but as a man who trusted his own family. I wanted to scream, to shout, to make her see that she'd destroyed everything between us. Instead, I just stood there, silent, watching her spin her lies, knowing that nothing she said was going to change what I'd seen with my own eyes. The days that followed were a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and I kept replaying that moment in my head, the betrayal, the lies, the way she looked at me like I was the crazy one. Emily was still acting like everything was fine, even after I threw her out of the house that night. She kept calling me paranoid, saying I was overreacting, that I had no proof of anything except my insecurities. But I knew better. I had seen enough now, and I refused to let her gaslight me into believing it was all in my head. I started digging more into her phone just to be sure. I couldn't trust her anymore, not after what I'd seen. I found more messages, more evidence of her and her brother. They'd been secretly texting about meeting up, about sneaking away for sex whenever they could. There were pictures, explicit ones, that I definitely didn't want to see but couldn't look away from. My stomach churned every time I looked at them. The worst part was knowing she had lied to my face so many times, hiding the truth. She'd been cheating on me with her own brother, and she still refused to admit it. I started to think about what I wanted to do. Part of me wanted to burn everything down, to expose her to everyone, to ruin her. I wanted her to feel the sting of betrayal, to know what it's like to be lied to and used like that. But I also knew that revenge isn't always the best way. I was hurt, yes, but I didn't want to become the kind of guy who destroys his life over a woman who clearly never cared about me. Still, I couldn't just walk away, not without making her feel some of what I felt, so I decided I'd confront her again, this time with proof in hand. I wanted her to face the reality of what she'd done. I wanted her to know I wasn't going to be played anymore. When I called her to meet at a nearby coffee shop, she acted surprised, like she didn't know what I wanted. I told her I had more questions, that I needed her to be honest. She rolled her eyes and tried to brush it off, saying I was being dramatic, that she wasn't cheating, that she loved me and only me, that she never meant for it to happen, that it was a mistake she'd regret forever. I stared at her, feeling this boiling anger inside. I told her I'd seen the texts, the pictures, the evidence of her and her brother's sex. I told her I knew about the affair, about how she'd been sneaking around behind my back while pretending everything was fine. Her face twisted into a sneer, and she snapped back that I was a jealous fool, that I was crazy for accusing her of such a thing. She called me possessive, insecure, and said I was ruining her reputation. I wanted to shake her, scream at her that she'd ruined everything already. But what I did was just sit there and watch her lie to my face again, knowing she'd never admit the truth. That moment was the tipping point. I realized I couldn't trust her anymore, not after all this. The betrayal was too deep. I felt so many emotions: anger, sadness, disgust, and an almost numb acceptance that my life was changing forever. I knew I had to decide whether to fight for her, to try to save what was left, or to cut my losses and start over. The pain of realizing she'd been unfaithful with her own brother, of knowing she'd lied so convincingly, was almost too much to bear. But deep down, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep pretending I was okay with this. After that confrontation, I felt like I was walking around in a haze. My mind kept circling back to everything: her lies, the sex with her brother, the way she always managed to spin things around to make me look like the bad guy. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. I'd trusted her with my life, and she'd been sneaking around, betraying me behind my back, all while pretending to be the perfect wife. That realization hit me hard. I remember sitting alone in my apartment, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of it all crushing me. I knew I needed to do something, but I wasn't sure what. Part of me wanted to just cut her out completely, to walk away and never look back. Another part, a darker part, wanted revenge, something to make her feel the pain she'd caused me. I started thinking about how I could make her regret her lies and her sex with her brother. I wasn't about to let her manipulate me anymore. I wanted her to see that her betrayal had consequences. My first move was to gather everything, more texts, pictures, screenshots, that proved what she'd been doing. I knew I'd need solid evidence if I wanted to confront her in a way that she couldn't deny. I also reached out to my brother, Mark, in a way that was cold but direct. I told him I knew what had happened, that I had proof, and that I was done playing games. His response was kind of a mess. He claimed it was a mistake, that he loved his sister but didn't mean to hurt me, that they'd both been weak and stupid. But I didn't care about his excuses. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew the truth. Then I made a decision. I was going to ruin her, but not in a way that would just hurt her emotionally. I wanted to make her pay publicly, painfully. I started planning how to expose her to our friends and family, how to reveal everything without holding back. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake, but about making her see that her lies had consequences. When I told her I was done trusting her, she freaked out. She called me crazy, told me I was ruining her reputation, that I was just jealous, that I was making everything worse. She kept denying everything, even as I showed her my phone with all the evidence. But I knew that her words were empty. She'd been caught. I realized then that I couldn't stay with someone who lied so effortlessly, who cheated and tried to gaslight me into thinking I was the crazy one. It was like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I had to walk away, even if it meant starting over alone. The trust was broken beyond repair, and I didn't want to be married to someone who would do that to me, especially with her own brother. That's when I started planning my next steps, what to say, who to tell, how to protect myself from her lies. That night I sat in the dark, thinking about everything. I realized I'd been a fool to think she was the love of my life. Turns out, she was just a selfish, manipulative woman who threw away her marriage for sex with her brother. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. But I also knew one thing for sure. I had to get out of this for my own sanity. I deserved better than this kind of betrayal. I promised myself that I wouldn't let her destroy me completely, even if it meant walking away with my heart shattered. The days after I made my decision to leave were some of the hardest of my life. Every waking moment, I felt like I was carrying a weight I couldn't shake. I started packing my things, not just out of necessity but almost as a way to reclaim some control. Every item I touched reminded me of what I thought I had, what I thought was real, and then I remembered the betrayal and the lies. It felt like waking up from a nightmare I didn't want to continue living. I knew I had to talk to her face to face to lay everything out. I told her I would be leaving, that I had enough evidence to show everyone what she really was, a liar, a cheat, and someone who would sleep with her own brother. Her reaction was classic Emily. She tried to act like she was the victim, crying, saying I was overreacting, that I was unfair and jealous. She begged me to stay, claiming she loved me and that it was all a mistake she'd regret forever. She even tried the classic, "It was just sex, it does mean anything," as if that made it okay. But I wasn't buying her bullshit anymore. I told her I knew everything, about the texts, the sex, the lies, and that I was done. I couldn't live with someone who had no respect for our marriage, our vows, or even her own brother. I told her I was going to expose her on social media, tell our friends, our family, everyone who she really was. I wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences, that I would not turn the other cheek this time. The final straw was how she tried to manipulate me, saying that it was all just a misunderstanding, that I was blowing things out of proportion. She accused me of being controlling, jealous, insecure, basically trying to turn the tables on me. I looked at her and saw no remorse, just that bitchy smirk she always wore when she thought she was winning. That's when I knew I'd made the right decision. She'd never change, never admit what she did, and I'd be better off without her. I spent the next few days gathering my strength, talking to friends, and planning how to tell everyone the truth. I wanted to be honest about what I'd discovered, but I also wanted to protect myself from her lies. I knew she'd try to spin everything, paint herself as the victim, and try to manipulate the situation to her advantage. But I had the evidence, the screenshots, the pictures, everything. I was ready to face whatever backlash came from exposing her. I was done hiding. That's when I realized something else. The pain was still there, deep and raw. It hurt like hell to find out the woman I loved, the woman I was planning to grow old with, had been cheating on me with her own brother. But I also felt a strange sense of liberation. I finally saw her for what she was, a selfish, manipulative woman who only cared about herself. As much as I wanted to crawl into a hole and drown in my heartbreak, I knew I had to be strong. I had to pick up the pieces and rebuild my life. Because honestly, I deserve better than this chaos. I deserve someone who respects me, someone who doesn't cheat with her own blood relatives. In the end, I went through with exposing everything. I posted the screenshots, the proof of her affair with her brother, and a long, bitter explanation of what I'd found out. The fallout was swift and brutal. Our friends and family were shocked, angry, disappointed. But honestly, I think a lot of them already had their suspicions. Emily tried to deny it all, spun her usual lies, but nobody bought her bullshit anymore. She lost her reputation, her friends, and her marriage, all in a matter of days. It was like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, but the pain still lingered. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and sick, but at the same time strangely relieved. I realized I'd been clinging to a fantasy, convincing myself that she was the woman I married, the woman I loved. But the truth was, she never really loved me. She loved her own selfishness, her lies, her secret affairs, and apparently her brother. That realization was brutal, but it finally set me free from the illusion I'd been living in. I stayed away from her after that. I moved out of our shared apartment, started seeing a therapist, and took the time to focus on myself. I knew I'd need time to heal, time to rebuild my trust in people and in myself. I also made peace with the fact that I might never fully understand how she could do something so twisted, so wrong. But I learned a lot about trust, betrayal, and what I truly deserve. I won't lie. I still get angry sometimes when I think about everything she put me through. But most days, I feel a sense of closure I never thought I'd find. Looking back, I realize I was naive for so long. I trusted her blindly, thinking she was the woman I'd marry, the woman I'd grow old with. Turns out I was just fooling myself. The experience was devastating, but it also made me realize my own strength. I learned that sometimes the worst betrayals come from those closest to you, and you have to be willing to walk away if you want to save yourself. Now, I'm moving forward. I have no illusions about finding perfect happiness overnight, but I do know I'll be okay. I've learned to recognize red flags sooner, to trust my instincts, and most importantly, not to settle for a woman who lies and cheats. Life's too short for that kind of pain. I hope anyone reading this who's going through something similar knows they're not alone. Trust your gut, gather your proof if you need to, and don't be afraid to walk away. You deserve better, and in the end, honesty and respect are what really matter.